Well, there's some new information coming in on the murder of a young Texas dentist. A love triangle may have played a role in the shooting death of Dr. Kendra Hatcher, seen there on the left. It happened in the parking garage of her apartment building in Dallas. Police arresting a woman, they say, who confessed to driving the gunman to that shooting. Now, documents show they're focusing on Hatcher's boyfriend's ex, who, according to a search warrant, allegedly used an iPhone to track Hatcher. How can authorities make a case? Here's our legal panel. Rebecca LeGrand, a criminal defense attorney, Dan Schorr, a former prosecutor. Rebecca, let me start with you. This seems kind of complicated. How do they unravel this if you have a former girlfriend of the man that she supposedly is dating implicated potentially in this?
Yeah, well, where they're going to start is with the one person they've already charged. They've already charged the getaway driver. And she can be prosecuted for capital murder, even though she didn't pull the trigger here. So she's going to be under immense pressure to work with the government and tell them everything she knows to try and agree to a plea agreement that's less serious than capital murder. So she's going to be telling them, I'd guess, everything she knows, which will bring them to the driver or the gunman in the car, and also potentially to someone who paid to set this all up. It sounds like it's possible that this ex-girlfriend paid to set this all up, and it will get to that pretty quickly if they just follow those dots.
Yeah, Dan, the young woman is 23-year-old Crystal Cortez. Let's say she gives up the gunman in this. How do they then track that back to the ex-girlfriend?
Well, there's a couple of things that track back to the ex-girlfriend. One is the car might be connected to the ex-girlfriend. The car was seen on surveillance, and they were able to connect it to Crystal Cortez, but it also might have a connection to the ex-girlfriend. Also, she says, according to the law enforcement documents that have been in the search warrant, that she talked to the ex-girlfriend. The ex-girlfriend actually paid her $500 to be a part of this. So if she's telling the police that she got firsthand information from the ex-girlfriend and instructions to be a part of this, even if Crystal Cortez didn't know that there was going to be a murder, if she just thought there was going to be some kind of robbery, which might be the case, she's still on the hook for murder because the shooting occurred in the course of the felony that she was voluntarily being a part of.
Yeah, and one of the most interesting things, Rebecca, too, is she apparently was tracked by the iPhone. How do you track someone else with the iPhone? I mean, I don't know how to do that.
It's surprisingly easy. There are lots of apps out there that are designed to help people, that are designed, oh, my kid has an iPhone, I'm his parent, I want to know where he is. So there are lots of apps that are legitimate, that are designed to let people agree that each other can track them. Maybe she had one of those in place, but there are also more nefarious apps that you can put on someone's phone to track them without their knowledge. Now, this may come back and bite her, because if the ex was using this software, odds are government investigators are going to be able to find out and track it to her phone. So this may end up being one of the things that gets her convicted as well. But it's real easy in this day and age to do things like this, to follow people's phones.
And there are a lot of ways, of course, for authorities to subpoena that information and go through your phone and your data and your computer to try to track that back. Meanwhile, let's go to another case, and that's the testimony that's underway in the trial of a Colorado man. He's accused of pushing his second wife off a cliff in the Rocky Mountains during a wedding anniversary trip. Prosecutors say Harold Hinthorn wanted her insurance money. Now he's also under investigation for the death of his first wife 20 years ago. Dan, a car apparently fell on the first wife. I mean, how can they potentially make a case 20 years later?
Right. In this case, he supposedly, according to the defendant, his wife accidentally fell off a cliff and died. Law enforcement is saying that he pushed her 20 years ago while he was changing a tire on the car with his first wife. The car fell on her and killed her. There was also an incident where a beam fell on the second wife and almost killed her a year before she fell off the cliff. Usually prior bad acts are not admissible in trial, but there's an exception, and the exception is if they help prove absence of mistake or absence of an accident. So the defendant's saying she fell by accident, showing that there have been prior incidents that might show a common scheme, common plan, or an absence of mistake, because suspicious things have happened before. That could be admitted, and here it will be admitted, and that will be powerful.
Well, you know, Rebecca, we're just looking at photos of Tony, who was the second wife who was allegedly fell off that cliff or was pushed, and that's the focus of that trial. I mean, how can you do that, what Dan says, when you, in criminal defense trials, you can't bring in someone's prior criminal record?
Well, as Dan said, it's going to come in here, even though it's not a criminal record. The husband had never been charged with killing anyone before, but that evidence is going to come in, and that's going to make this real hard for the defense. I mean, as a defense attorney, this stuff worries me, because accidents do happen. People do get struck by lightning twice. It's weird, it doesn't happen often, but it happens. And what can happen is a jury wants to see a motive from a coincidence, it's dangerous. It can be prejudicial. Here they're going to get to consider. They're going to get to consider the fact that his first wife died too, 20 years ago, and they're going to have to take that into account. But that's nervous. Something that makes me nervous as a defense attorney, because you don't want a jury to jump to conclusions based on what could be two separate accidents.
What do you think is going to happen?
Well, there's other evidence against this defendant also, so I think there's a good chance he will be convicted. He reportedly told 4 different versions of what happened. There was a map found in his car with an X on the spot where she subsequently fell off the cliff. So there's a lot of evidence besides the prior suspicious acts, and I think he might be convicted because of that.
Yeah, man, oh man, not good if you have an ex where your wife then supposedly fell. Rebecca and Dan, thanks so much for your insight today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.